Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, we are diving deep into something that often gets overlooked but plays a very crucial role in writing cleaner, safer, and secure JavaScript code, and that is strict mode. Strict mode was introduced in ECMAScript 5. It allows us to opt into a restricted version of JavaScript. It helps each common coding mistake and prevents us from using potentially dangerous or error prone features. Think of it like that we turn on the extra safety checks while coding. It won't change that how JavaScript code works at runtime, but it will enforce better coding practices and make it easier to debug issues. So why we should care about strict mode? Strict mode can stop us from accidentally using the undeclared variables, deleting essential objects, or writing duplicate parameter names. These kinds of mistakes might silently fail in the normal JavaScript and it making the bugs harder to track down. In this video, we'll break down what strict mode is, why we should use it, and when to use it, and how it impacts our code both in functions and at the global level. By the end of this video, you will understand not just the how, but also the why behind the strict mode, so you can write more robust professional level JavaScript code. So stick around it and let's get started. First of all, let's see that what is strict mode. Strict mode is a feature that is introduced in the ECMAScript 5 and it helps developers to write the cleaner, more secure JavaScript code. It also changes that how the JavaScript engine will behave. It enforces the strict parsing and error handling rules that our JavaScript engine will behave more secure. It means that the certain level of the bad syntax or risky behaviors that are normally allowed in the non-strict mode, they will throw errors when the strict mode is enabled. It doesn't add new features to our code, it doesn't add something new to our code, but it will make our code more safer and more secure. So now let's see how we can enable the strict mode. We can enable the strict mode by placing a string that is use strict at the top of our script or a function. So basically there are two scopes where we can enable our strict mode. The one is the global scope. We can enable the strict mode at the global level, and the other is function scope. We can enable the strict mode at the function level. So let's see one by one how we can do this. So by enabling the strict mode at the global level, what we do at the very top of our file, we just write a simple string and that is use strict. So you see, we are writing use strict at the very top of the file. So now strict mode will be enabled on this file. So that's how we can enable the strict mode at the global level. So now if I try to access a variable that is undeclared, it will give us error. For example, if I write here x is equal to 10 and here I write console.log and I just write simple text. Now if I try to run the file, this file will give me the error. So if I try to run the file, node strictmode.js, so you see there is an error. X is not defined. But what if I remove it? Now if I save the file and if I run the file, so you see, there is no error. Console.log will be printed. X is the undeclared variable, but normal JavaScript allows it. But when we use the strict mode, it will not allow us. If I write it back, use strict, and now if I save the file, and again if I run the file, so you see, now I am getting error. X is not defined. Before, it run the code in the normal JavaScript, but when I enable the strict mode, it will giving me the error. X is not defined. Why? Because it is saying that X is an undeclared variable. X is not a declared variable. So that's how we can enable the strict mode at the global level. So now let's see how we can enable the strict mode at the function level. So for this, first of all, I create a simple function and I write it name simple function, and it is a simple function, and I just write console.log and simple text in function. So now if I write here that x is equal to 10 just like before we declared, so now if inside the function I just write an undeclared variable, This variable is not declared. It is an undeclared variable. So now if I call this function, simple function, so if I save the file and if I run the file, you will see that I will get this console.log without any error. So now if I run the file, so you see, I get the console.log. There will be no error. Okay. But we have an undeclared variable inside the function, but we are getting no error. Similarly, as we enable the strict mode at the global level, in the function level, we can also enable the strict mode. So how to do this? For enabling strict mode, first of all, at the very top of the function, we just write use strict. So now in this case, strict mode is enabled only within this function, not at the global level, but only within this function. So now if I save the file and if I run the file, so you see, now we are getting an error. What is the error? X is not defined. X is not defined. But when we remove this strict mode, when we remove this strict mode, now if I save the file, and now you will see that there will be no error. So now if I run the file, so now you see console.log is printed. There is no error. Why? Because we remove the strict mode. We remove the strict mode from the function. So that's how strict mode works at the function level. It is very important to note that the use strict string, it must be appear at the very top of the script or the function. Otherwise, it won't have any effect. For example, if I just write here use strict after the variable, now I write use strict string after the undeclared variable. So in this case, if I save the file, in this case, it will not work. This will not work. So now if I run the file, there will be no error. So you see, there is no error. We can get our console.log. There is no error in the console. Why? Because strict mode was written after the undeclared variable. To enabling the strict mode, we have to write the use strict string at the very top level. So now let's see that's what are the most common errors that strict mode helps to catch, and more importantly, that why and how these error occurs. This is where strict mode really proves its value. So let's see one by one. So the very first one, undeclared variables. If I just write here x is equal to 10. So now normally in the non-strict mode, JavaScript would automatically create a global variable x even though it was never declared using var, let or const. But when we are using the strict mode, when strict mode is enabled, this throws a reference error because all the variables must be declared explicitly. This protects us from accidentally polluting the global scope, which is one of the top causes of bugs in the larger application. So now our strict mode is not enabled. So now in this case, if I just write here console.log and simple text, now if I save the file and if I run the file, I will not get any error. So you see, I get my console.log. I will not get any error. Why? Because our strict mode is not enabled. Our strict mode is not enabled. But when I enable this strict mode, and now if I save the file, and now again if I run the file, now I will see an error. So you see, x is not defined. So that's how when strict mode is enabled, undeclared variables will throw an error. The next one is assigning to read-only properties. For example, if I create an object const obj, and this is my simple object, and after it I write object dot define property, and inside this method I just pass my obj and I write value, and after it I just write value, which is I can write 45, and after that I just write writable false. So now what I'm doing, I create an object, and inside the object I just pass a value, and that value is 45, and I make this value is only readable. It is not writable because I make the writable false. Now this object is only readable object. So now if I try to change the value of this object, it will give me the error. Why? Because the value of this object is only readable. It is only readable property. So now first I just write console.log, and in this if I write obj dot value. So now if I save the file and if I run the file, so you see, I am getting 45. I am getting the value. I can read the value, but if I try to change the value, if I try to write the value, it will give me the error. So now if I write here that obj.value is equal to, instead of 45, I want to change it 32. So now if I save the file and if I try to run the file, now I will get an error. So you see, I am getting an error. What is the error? Cannot assign to read-only property value of object. You see, the same thing. We cannot assign the value to the read-only properties. So this is where strict mode can find this error. It can throw this error. But if I disable this strict mode, if I disable this, and now if I save the file, and now if I try to change the value of 32 and access it, so now if I run the file, so now I am seeing the value 45. Now there is no error. Strict mode is disabled. So now it doesn't throw any error. But when we enable the strict mode, at that point, it will throw the error. So the next error that the strict mode will give us, that is when we try to deleting the non-deletable properties. For example, the built-in properties like object.prototype or non-configurable properties. So meaning they cannot be deleted. In normal mode, try to deleting them fails silently, but in strict mode, this section throws a type error, helping us identify that we are attempting something which is invalid, which could potentially break the core JavaScript behavior. So now let's see that how we can do this. So now if I try to delete the object, so I write delete and I write here object.prototype. So after this, I just write simple console.log and it is simple text. So now our strict mode is enabled. Yes, our strict mode is enabled. So now if I try to run this code, this will give me the error. So if I save the file and if I run the file, I will see an error. So you see, there is error. Cannot delete property prototype of function object. I cannot delete this property. I cannot delete this prototype property. Why? Because strict mode is on. So in the normal JavaScript, we also cannot delete this. In the normal JavaScript, this behavior will silently fail. This behavior will also fail in the normal JavaScript, but silently. There will be no error. For example, if I comment this and now if I disable the strict mode, now in this case, there will be no error. So you see, I am getting my console.log, simple text. There is no error. Why? Because we disable the strict mode. Enable it back. Now if I try to run, again I am getting the error. So you see, again error. We cannot delete prototype. The next one is duplicating the function parameter names. In the non-strict mode, if I write the two parameter with the same name, the code will run and the last argument value overrides the previous one. In strict mode, this will throw a syntax error because duplicate parameter names can create confusions, make debugging harder, and break consistency across browsers. So strict mode forces unique parameter names for clarity and predictability. So let's create a simple function and function name is getValue. And here I am receiving parameter value. Now I just console.log here value. So now if I receive two parameter with the same name, so what it will do, the second one will override the first one. If I just call this function here, getValue, and I pass first parameter 12 and second parameter 8. So now what will be printed? 8 will be printed. Why? Because second parameter will override the first one. So now if I save the file, if I run the file, so you see 8 will be printed. 8 overrides the 12. So the second parameter overrides the first parameter. So now this is when our strict mode is disabled. But when we enable our strict mode, when we just try to use strict at the top and our strict mode is enabled, so now in this case, this behavior will give us the error. So now if I save the file and if I run the file, so you see I am getting an error. What is error? Syntax error. Duplicate parameter name not allowed in this context. Before it was overriding, but when I enable the strict mode, it is giving the error that duplicate parameter names are not allowed. So that's how strict mode detects that error. The next one is assignment to eval and arguments. Eval and arguments are the special reserved keywords in the JavaScript. In strict mode, we cannot assign values to them because doing so would interfere the JavaScript's internal behavior that is related to scope and execution context. So strict mode protects these keywords and throws a syntax error when we misuse them. So let's see how we can get the error. So now our strict mode is enable. Let me check. Okay, strict mode is enable. So now if I write here eval, so eval is a special word, reserved keyword. So now if I try to assign the value eval to 5, so now this will throw an error, which is a compile time error. What is error? Invalid use of eval in strict mode. But what if I disable this? If I disable my strict mode, now you see there is no compile time error. There will be no red line and no compile time error. But when I just enable strict mode, so let me enable the strict mode. Now it is error. There is a red line under the eval keyword. So now what is the error? Invalid use of eval in strict mode. So similarly, if I write here that arguments and I try to assign the value arguments and that is 23, again it is giving the error, invalid use of arguments in strict mode. In the non-strict mode, we cannot get any error, but with the strict mode, we get the error that we cannot use these reserved keywords. So now it is giving a compile time error. Now it is giving a compile time error that we cannot use the eval keyword in the strict mode and also invalid use of arguments in strict mode. So that's how assignment to eval and arguments keyword is not working in the strict mode. The next error that the strict mode will check, and that is octal literals are not allowed. So what are octal literals? Numbers that are starting from the 0, they are treated as octal literals in older JavaScript version. This can cause unexpected results if we are unaware. Strict mode disallows this outdated syntax entirely, throwing a syntax error, encouraging us to use proper decimal or hexadecimal notation. For example, if I just write here, so let me create a number here. I just write a number that starts from the 0. So I just write 023. So you see, it is giving the error. What is the error? Octal literals are not allowed. Our use strict mode is enable. So that's how use strict mode can detect the error that octal literals are not allowed. So if I remove this, so now it is a normal number, which is a 23. But if I write a number that starts from 0, so it will give me the error. So that's how strict mode detects the octal literal errors. The octal literal is an outdated syntax entirely, but still the strict mode will throw an syntax error when we are using the octal literals. So that's all about strict mode in JavaScript. As you have seen that it's not just a rule enforcer, it's a valuable tool that helps us write cleaner, safer, and more predictable code. By catching silent errors, blocking unsafe practices, and encouraging better coding habits, strict mode plays a vital role in writing modern JavaScript, especially when we are working on production level projects and collaborating in a team. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with the more practical and developer-focused content. Also, let me know in the comments, have you been using the strict mode in your projects? Or did today's video change your mind about its importance? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep coding and keep growing.